Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We're gonna give about 30 seconds to 1 minute the time for everyone to log in. And very excited to do another class with Portland Cocktail Week and Chelsea Gregoire. How are you, Chelsea, today?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. I like your shirt. We matched together today.
We sent out the memo. Memo was received. We are here.
Excellent. Well, this is our second class together, so I'm really excited to be back again, Chelsea.
Yep.
And of course, we have a lot of great things to talk about today. And it's going to be really interesting, knowledgeable, informative. And I think we're going to start now. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Xavier Herit. I'm the brand ambassador for Grand Marnier in the United States. The Campfire Academy and Grand Marnier are very excited to partner one more time with Portland Cocktail Week for this exciting programming. During this special edition, I would like to welcome Chelsea Gregoire, who is based in Baltimore. Chelsea has numerous awards and accomplishments, including being named America Beverage Directors of the Year by Esquire. Also, Eater by multiple local publications. Chelsea is going to share today her experience and knowledge on how to create some system for your staff to help them succeed, and that can make you a better manager. So a lot about leading role, managing roles, and I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from this class today. Chelsea, how are you today? Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what made you decide to go into this industry and about your career?
Yeah. Awesome. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks to you, Campari, and Grand Marnier for having us here today. And thanks to Portland Cocktail Week for hosting us. Really, really excited to talk to you all today. Management and leadership has always been something I've been very passionate about. For those who don't know much about my background, so I have a master's degree in theology, which of course, has lended to my experience in teaching and a little bit in preaching. And, obviously we didn't head down that route. I, went into hospitality, I went into restaurants, I went into bars, but that spirit of like leadership and teaching through everything that I do has always been at the forefront of kind of my ethos. And so I, hope that that's the reason why I've been fortunate enough to be given some of these awards. But, at the end of the day, it's not about the awards for me. It's more about the legacy of, the teams that I lead and whether or not my team has felt empowered by the way that I've led them. And so, today we're going to talk on kind of a high level about what that looks like. But I want you all to, at home, like really don't be afraid to be engaged with us today. Xavier is looking at your questions as they come in, and we really want to make this more conversational. Xavier, you mentioned when we were kind of like planning this that you have management experience as well. Can you tell people?
I do. I used to manage F&B departments, and I used also to corner place. So I really understand a lot of these topics, and I think there's one thing which is very interesting in management. There's always something to learn. There's always something to improve. So I think we have some really, really exciting topics to talk about today, for sure.
Awesome. Well, if we want to go ahead and get started, I feel really excited to be presenting this. I hope that everybody has some Grand Marnier with them. I obviously have some behind me, but feel free to sip along if you would like as we talk about this. But of course, today's class is called Let's Be Practical. So here's some kind of like guidelines, some benchmarks for what we're going to discuss today. So of course, to understand where we're going, we have to understand where we've been. And so the first thing we're going to start off with is identifying what doesn't work as it stands right now. And I'm going to, when we get to that point, I'm going to put a list up of some things that haven't worked in the past and things that our industry has called out and has drawn attention to, saying, this is a system that's broken. this is something that doesn't work. But of course, this is not an exhaustive list, and it's pretty high level. So there's lots of subcategories in there. But the real heart of it is understanding that success for our staff starts with the systems you construct. And anybody who has been in management or has had a strong manager has seen that the stability of the workplace and the stability of your work environment really comes from the systems that have been put in place. And by systems, I don't just mean a great spreadsheet to do inventory. Of course, those things add stability and they're very helpful. But systems also, when I say systems, I'm also talking about patterns and, the ways that we teach and the ways that we train, the ways we communicate, the boundaries we set. These are all systems that we've built around us because they all work together in tandem to create one overall experience. We're also going to kind of discuss what the word success and the word support mean for us and how we define those in terms of when we're talking about our staff. And then we're going to talk about action plans, which is the way to get any of these things off the ground and get them going. And then we're going to examine along with that, how we need to look introspectively at how we contribute to this or how we take away from it. And, the success and failure of these systems and of these values that we put forth really start with our approach, our bias, and how we hold ourselves accountable. So without further ado, what doesn't work? So these are things that we've identified as an industry. And like I said, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are things that we've identified that are supporting some people at best, but they're certainly not supporting everyone. And so, there's a large call to dismantle a lot of these systems and to rethink how they're being done. And I'm in full support of that. I have a lot of ideas about how we can dismantle wage inequity in restaurants and bars, but I don't have the end all be all answer because it's going to take all of us working collaboratively and being experimental in our approach and having a lot of conversations to really figure out what the actual move is to dismantle and then fix these things. But some of these things that don't work include wages. We're talking about the disparity between different positions. We're talking about tipping models. We're talking about the disparity between front of house and back of house in how they get paid. We're talking about training models. Anybody that's seen me kind of talk about education before, this is in terms of soapboxes, this is probably a medium to medium large soapbox that I have that's very passionate about how we educate and how we teach others. And so, training right now for a lot of places is here's the manual, here are the drinks. 2 weeks from now, you're in the tip pool, you're on your own. I think we should probably move away from that and go to something that lends more into, the ability for people to continue their learning journey. Hiring practices and transparency of expectations. What do your job descriptions look like? How are you hiring? What does your interview process look like? What are the requirements of the position that you are hiring for? Making sure that that's very transparent and very consistent. And of course, on a management level, communication from leaders to the staff and also between leaders, because anybody who's worked in a place where leaders are not communicating effectively with one another has seen how that trickles down into the workplace and how people deal with each other and how they in turn communicate with each other. So like I said, systems that we construct is the baseline for what we deem success to be. And these are some hypothetical questions. once again, not exhaustive, but this is kind of what I mean when I'm talking about systems that we construct. Does every new employee get the same exact training regimen and opportunity to learn? So what does that training regimen look like? Is it the same regardless of people's prior experience, sorry, tripping over my words there for a second. So does every employee get the same attention? Do they get the same opportunity to learn, the opportunity to grow? Are your policies, including tip breakdowns, wages, are those transparent? Are you, open to having conversations with them about those things? Because if you aren't open about talking about it, then why would your staff feel open to talk about it with each other? Have management and ownership establish healthy boundaries for their interactions in the workplace, their interactions with each other, their interactions with guests, their interactions with their staff? Are leaders delegating and generating collaboration effectively? So, when I ask this question, is a leader not creating good boundaries in themselves to where they can't delegate work as needed, and so they're burning themselves out and they're acting out of frustration or anger in the workplace? When I talk about generating collaboration, it's similar to delegating, but it's more so along the lines of, are you creating a path for people to contribute to your program? Are your bartenders helping you create cocktails on your menu? Are you creating a framework for what that looks like in a way that's educational and also beneficial to the whole team? When we start to dig into things like HR, is there a way for an employee to blow a whistle safely and securely on an issue they're experiencing? This is a big one right now. A lot of places can't afford an HR professional. And so a lot of these things get pushed, to the side when this is really important, that there's good communication practices that are open and able for people to come forward and say that they're experiencing something that is unjust or inequitable or downright inappropriate or whatever that is. And do managers have systems in place within themselves and overarching for the whole restaurant that they can follow up with these things, but also follow through? If anybody was tuned into the Instagram live, it's kind of like you can't say something's wrong and then be like, bye. It's not just enough to name it. You have to then say, okay, we have named what's going on and how do we follow through to fix it? So some hypothetical questions and some systems that we construct on a day-to-day basis, whether we know it or not. That's the big thing is, you don't necessarily set out to say, this is our transparency system, right? Transparency comes from just how you behave, how you communicate with other people, and how you choose to lead from your own knowledge. So, how are you doing, Xavier? Are you good?
Good. No questions so far. I think, Rana, this is great to see the introduction about all these important points.
Yeah.
I can't be more agree than anything you're saying right now. Okay. I think management is a lot about delegating, trusting, but also the part this is beneficial for the employees, but also beneficial for the team in general. And there's a lot of points which are actually can be helpful to. I think a lot of the issues of management is sometimes we try to overdo too much by yourself. Yes. And it's a vicious cycle where we start to burn ourselves out by trying to do too many things. Right. And by delegating, by having great communication with other managers are very important because you can already give more support to the team, but also educating, keep people exciting, and also have them learning something every day is really important because more knowledge for the better for the team. I can be more agree with that.
Yeah, you brought up a good point that, how you have built in support for yourself as a manager is a system. That's a huge, huge system. And so many managers burn out or they get frustrated or they quit, because they haven't taken the time to be like, when this happens and it falls on me and I can't handle it, who does it fall on? And then they feel like the world is resting on their shoulders, because at the end of the day, if you're a manager who, cares and loves your staff, you take that very personally, their success and their happiness, and making sure that they have the tools to succeed. And if you don't have, support for yourself, then you aren't succeeding. You aren't feeling supported. And it becomes this domino effect that, the dominoes fall this way, but it affects everything that came before it. So I'm going to jump back to the slides, but that was a great point. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So next we need to talk about, success and support. And these are words that we hear and we say all the time. And, at the end of the day, there needs to be metrics and there needs to be an understanding of, and we'll talk about this more when we get into action plans, but, you can't just say success, because success is an umbrella term that applies differently in every restaurant, every bar. Success looks different. It looks different in every market with different people. So by having a one size fit all for success is not doing anyone any favors. So you need to know how you define success, and how you define it for each person on your staff, because some people experience it and show that success differently. And also, I will say, when I say success, I don't mean success of the business. Of course, that is something that's at the forefront of our minds when we are operating a business and we are in those daily operations. But when I talk about success here, what does it look like for your team to be successful and for you to be successful in what you set out to do? I'm not talking about business success. So when I talk about defining success, it's about, how do I want my employees to feel about their workplace? That's me being successful at my job. If my employees feel the way that I have intended for them to feel when they come to work. It's also acknowledging, to what stage in their professional goals can I realistically get my employees? No one is saying, as a manager and as a mentor, that you have to hold an employee's hand the entire way to get them from point A to point B to point C, but at what stage can you get them there? And having those conversations to know what their goals look like. And then setting boundaries, but also concrete goals for your team, for yourself, and how are you doing in being transparent about what that path looks like to achieve them, which is something we're going to dive into more with action plans. So on the flip side of that, how do you define support? So this is when things start to get a little more introspective. What situations are you equipped to handle? And what situations are you ill-equipped to handle? And this is where, you have to be realistic with yourself as a human and as a leader, and acknowledge your shortcomings, and know that you can't be the end all be all, because you're a human being and you will make mistakes. But who is going to help when that mistake is made? Who is going to fill in and handle that situation when you cannot? Or when you have to deal with one thing over here and another? It can't all fall on you. So what support system have you constructed around yourself and for yourself to support yourself, so then you can support your team? What do you aim to provide for your team on a professional basis, a mental, physical basis, a financial basis? I'm going to go ahead and say that my answer for this, for me as a leader, is always transparency. So providing for my team on a professional basis looks like me being transparent about what we can do to get them to the next step in their professional goals. On a mental and physical basis, it's me being transparent on a day-to-day basis about how things are going, how everyone's feeling, what the temperature in the room is, and not just being the stoic person in the suit in the corner. It's being more transparent and communicative about what's going on. And then financial, it's also transparency. We need to be more transparent with our teams about how things are going, how different decisions affect things. Because at the end of the day, it makes you a better communicating leader, but it also allows people to understand to some extent, what's going on when they break a glass and it's frustrating, or what happens when they give away a drink and they weren't supposed to give away a drink. Like, why is that frustrating? Why is that not okay? If we are saying it's not okay, we have to say why, right? So for me, those questions, I always answer it with a level of transparency. But for you, that may be a little bit different. So, when you're defining support for yourself, you have to create these benchmarks of what you aim to provide on all of these levels, because then those are your benchmarks to know if you are supporting your team. And then at the end of the day, how are you determining if you've provided these things? Are you checking in with your staff once a month? Are you checking in with them daily? Are you doing an anonymous survey to see how they're feeling about these systems that you've put in place? Like, there's lots of different ways you can do this, and different levels of like one-on-one, or group conversations are, like I said, completely anonymous. But you have to also know you can't just be like, we provide support for our staff by providing health insurance. If you don't, at the end of the day, at the end of 6 months, end of a year, when it comes to that enrollment period again, did this work for you? How is this affecting your day-to-day life? It is affecting take-home pay. What does this look like for you? Having these conversations is, at the end of the day, sometimes that just having that conversation is support in itself. But also the information that you get from those conversations equips you to provide support in the long term. Xavier, I see you nodding a lot. So
no, everything you said is right. Everything is connected to this communication between the staff and the management, and between everyone. Communication is definitely the key of success. Transparency, yes. If someone does something right or wrong, we need to explain why. We need to explain the reason behind it. It cannot just be, no, it's wrong. And people need to learn. People need to understand why. But also, it's important also to create a healthy environment where people feel really happy and everything is connected to it. I don't want to speak too much because there's more slides to come over, but everything is connected because more of the staff is happy and less we have turnover, and everything's benefit for everyone. And it's creating a healthy environment is really something important at work, I think.
Yeah. It's also important to look at it at a larger scale, right? So, I can think back to experiences that I've had in restaurants where I did not feel like, the restaurant cared about my success, or they didn't care about, being supportive, or they didn't care about communicating. And those things have stuck with me, and so I take almost like a level of baggage with me to different, situations of employment, because this is the expectation that's been set for me by other employers. So, we're not saying that, we're creating an environment that nobody ever wants to leave, because ideally, those people go on, they take the next step in their professional career, and the whole system, the whole industry grows, right? It's, the way that you support your staff, those things stick with people. And the people who experience supportive management, that have that mentorship, that have learned a lot in a position, they take that with them regardless of whether they stay with you or whether they go to open their own bar or they go to lead their own beverage program. Everything you do and the way you communicate, the way you lead, has repercussions for the entire industry. And I think we've seen this a lot, over the past year or so, where people are starting to be very honest about experiences they've had with employers prior that they did not feel they could talk about it before, but it stuck with them. And so now people are like, well, who else has had an experience with this person? And then like 20 hands go up, because this has stuck with them. This has dictated their expectations for employment moving forward. So, I mean, yeah, it's a huge thing on the individual restaurant and bar level, but it's a whole nother thing when you talk about the global or even just in your market scope of like what that looks like for the future of the industry. So cool.
Well said.
Thank you. I tried. Okay, so this is I think, you know, in the description for the class, we talked about templates. This is the most important template I can give you, because this is how every spreadsheet, every, you know, educational opportunity, this is how it all starts. It starts with creating an action plan, something that is concrete, that's written down, that you can make as a commitment, that doesn't cost any money. It just costs your mental energy to kind of put it down on paper and to say, okay, this is how we're going to get from point A to point B. And then once we've reached point B, then our next benchmark is this, and our next benchmark is this, until you've reached a goal. And this is not like a completely linear in one direction thing. There's going to be a lot of times, and you'll see, I'm going to show you an example of an action plan. But a lot of times you get into this, you're like really, really excited and zealous, and you're like, I'm going to write this action plan, and we're going to like teach everybody all the things, and it's going to be awesome. And then you get to that like second to last question, which is like, what's not in place? And you're like, oh crap. Well, now I have to write action plans for all of these things that are not currently in place. And those can be discouraging, but it's important to outline it, so then you can say, you know what, there's a system that needs to be dismantled that's standing in the way of this action plan happening. And then you have your marching orders before you can go through with the action plan. But you know that when you really start going through the motions and you start to put things into practice, that it's going to work. So action plans, what's the area in which this action is going to be taken? So, you know, education, you know, transparency, leadership, you know, education in like we're talking like finance. Are we talking bar education? Are we talking mentorship? You know, this is like that general area of expertise. What is the end goal 5 years from now? Which in this industry, it's really hard to think 5 years out. But when we think about people's professional goals, when we think about the ups and downs of things, 5 years is actually like a very actionable span of time that, you know, the same team you have right now, they may not be on board with this action plan, or it may not be important to them, or things may happen in their life. And then you can actually use this action plan to dictate, you know, things from the beginning with a new employee and, you know, start off on the right foot. So 5 years is scary. I'm saying it's a good span of time, but if you need to make it shorter, if it's something that has less set benchmarks, then make it shorter. Make it a year from now, make it 2 years from now, make it 6 months from now. And then what are your set benchmarks? These aren't just achievements, these are deadlines. So, you know, I would like to get to this point from this point to 6 months from now. This is where I would like to be. And my suggestion is always to work backwards. So if you have the end goal and you've stated that out and you've written it out, and you've kind of like writing it out is kind of like manifesting. So I'm going to use that because you're kind of like putting it out into the ether that this is your goal and this is where you want to go. Then work backwards. So then if you've made a 5 year, then maybe you make a 3 year or a 2.5 year, and then you make a 1 year, and then you make a 6 months, and then when you go back and read it, you're like, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense. And this is like a very realistic goal because I have to meet these other things. But now I've spanned it out for myself. I've planned it, and I can see the road ahead of me. And then it gets into the really like hard things. So what's currently in place to help us achieve this goal? What systems, what values have you already put in place that are commonplace in your place of work to help you get there? And then on the flip of that, what is not in place to help us achieve this goal? And if we're being realistic with ourselves, there is going to be at least one thing that you fill out there. And I'm above anything else on this action plan. That's where you have to be the most introspective and the most honest with yourself about what you have to do, what your work actually looks like. And then, of course, at the end of it, this is the thing that you like put on the Post-it note and you put it on your bathroom mirror. What's the why? The motivation when things look like they're not working out. Why are you doing it at the end of the day? It's never just about the how. So this is kind of smaller type, but I kind of wrote out a fake action plan. And so if you are somebody like me who needs to screenshot stuff, I know that they're going to share the presentation as well so you can download it. But this is kind of like me doing this is not like my actual experience, but I wanted to kind of fill in what this looks like. So, this is getting employees to their professional goals and then saying what that professional goal is, and then setting yourself benchmarks. So 3 years from now, 1 year from now, 6 months from now, 3 months from now, and what I've kind of achieved. And then what's currently in place, what's not in place. So I want to, all of this you can read on your own, but I want to focus on the what is not in place. So the person who wrote this, hypothetically, it's me in another life. They don't currently have an education plan. They aren't fully aware of what each employee's professional goals is. So we're not going to put like a blanket professional goal on everyone because maybe not all of your bartenders want to run their own beverage programs. So I need to talk to all my employees. A list of the educational and professional resources. And then there's the hard things. I need to audit my own ability to mentor my team. How am I doing on my mentorship skills? How am I taking care of my team? And also putting out in black and white a transparent way to reach leadership in our current bar. Because how are we going to get people from point A, a bartender, to point C, leading their own beverage program, if they don't have that actual trajectory for this bar alone? It's like saying I'm going to teach you how to do this, but you can't do it here. Like that doesn't make any sense. So, there's things that we have to do to, one, be transparent, two, be honest about the action plan, and three, to make sure we're not working against ourselves when we're creating it. And then, of course, like the why and the motivation is, it's my responsibility to pave this path however I can in this moment. I was not given a path to leadership, whether here or elsewhere, and my team deserves the opportunity and support to achieve their professional goals. That's the stuff you put on the Post-it note and you say, at the end of the day, when the going gets tough, that's what I'm referring back to because that's the most important thing. Xavier, do you have any?
Yes, no, I think it's a very, very good plan. Do you believe also in incentive to motivate your staff or to get them a goal to achieve? Or
I think that comes, that was just like a hypothetical action plan, but, I think that depends on the systems you've already set in place, right? Yeah. So if you work in a bar that, maybe you're a bar that does like a lot of sales contests, or you do, like cocktail competitions or things like that, then these like incentives may make sense for your team because that's the type of learning you've built in. It's incentive based. If I get to this point, I get this. If I get to this point, I get this. In some places, they don't have that. So a lot of it is just, that strengthened relationship between management and their staff to say like, I believe in you and I'm backing you up. And like, I'm communicating with you about where you are now and where you want to be. And I'm going to do everything I can to get you to that point. But I know, we have to create a plan. We have to outline this. So it really, it depends on what you already have in place, which is why that what's currently in place to support this is important, because then you would say, oh, if I already have like incentive-based learning in place, then maybe that I should go back and adjust my benchmarks and like put a little incentive in with it, Yeah.
And
I don't want to like make an action plan that like the table on your staff and you're like, we're doing everything different from now on. Like, hold on to your hat. You're like, You don't want to do that either. That's very like unstable and kind of scary.
I think one thing which is really important, what you mentioned, Chelsea, is giving the opportunity of the staff to improve into the positions and being able to be promoted and to continue to learn. And I think it gives the goals to the staff and excitement to learn more. And everyone deserves to start somewhere and to grow somewhere else. Yep. And I think it's if you give us opportunity for people to learn and to get promoted in some deep higher positions, they will be very grateful all their life for that, because you will give them the way to grow in their career. And I think this
maybe you can only get them to a certain point.
Yeah.
Then at the end of the day, your friend's opening a bar down the street, they need a lead bartender, and you say, I have somebody. And then you say, hey, there's this opportunity if you apply for it, la, 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 la. But you've done the due diligence of like mentoring and caring for your staff's professional goals in a way that a lot of managers would not do that. They would, take it very personally if a person's leaving. But at the end of the day, it benefits you, it benefits your team, it benefits your market, it benefits the whole industry for you to empower people with the tools to move on and to do their own thing. So, yeah. All right, we're going to get back to the presentation. This is where it really gets into the hard stuff. So, here's the title of the presentation. Let's be practical and realistic. So when you're creating an action plan, it might shine an uncomfortable light on mistakes we've made in the past, is the way to sum it up. And I want to, before I read them to you, look at the bottom. This is important that these things have a light shown on them, and it's healthy for you to be critical with yourself, because if you're not critical of what is currently in place, then you aren't motivated actually to take action on anything if you can't see what's broken and what's working and what's not. So when you're creating an action plan, systems you've constructed may get in the way of your goals and plans, and those may have to be dismantled. And then, you have to say, maybe my action plan is looking at this the wrong way. If that system is working and that system is beneficial to the greater good, maybe I just need to rethink how I'm achieving this goal. We all have bias or assumptions about how professionalism is shown, how people's goals are thought about, how people go after their goals. We all have this innate bias of what that looks like. It's typically based on how you came up or how your mentor came up, but not everybody's journey is the same. So, creating an action plan may shine a light on I think this is, the trajectory of how this should happen, and it's just not realistic. And so that's something you need to come to terms with. You may also be forced to come to terms with how unprepared you are to tackle this plan at the moment. And that's fine. And it also will shine a light on how you have used language or led in a way that implies the opposite of these goals. And how you failed to support your team in the past. None of us are perfect. We're human beings. We're put in a position of leadership. We all know that some leaders are born leaders and they can step into a role and they can do it. And some people have to learn these things, and they learn the hard way, and you make mistakes. But at the end of the day, we're human beings. We are not beyond growing and changing and adapting to, a new way of thinking and approaching things. But it starts with being honest with yourself about, those mistakes and naming them. You can't just stay up at night every night and be like, I 10 years ago talked to that employee in a way that I feel was really discouraging, and beat yourself up about it. That's not productive. What is productive is to name it, to say, I did that, and I have grown and I've changed, and this is how I approach this now. And this is how I have grown as a human being. So this is the heart of this class, is let's be practical, is there is a level of introspection here that when you're creating plans to support your staff, it always starts with you. It always starts with you and what skills you've built for yourself to support yourself to make sure you are growing. So with that, I'm going to go to the next slide. So here are some tips when you're feeling that light shining on that. It's okay to pause your plan and start to work on your own personal growth. Maybe instead of this grand plan, you start smaller, or maybe a little bit larger. By larger, I mean like higher level, some things that are a little bit more foundational, with relearning how to communicate effectively, or by dismantling those systems or things that already exist. Sometimes you have to just pause and examine if you followed this path for yourself first. I call this the change in cabin pressure situation. You have to put on your own mask first in order to help those around you. That rings truer now than it ever has before, but we are not in a plane, 2020. But still, sometimes you have to make sure that you are getting the support you need before you can help other people. You can't just, a religious metaphor that, I learned when I was in school is like, when you are giving, when you are leading, you are pouring out of yourself, and you can't pour from an empty vessel. If you don't have something or someone or growth happening inside of you, you can't spontaneously cause growth to be experienced outside of you through you. Like, it just doesn't work. So, check your energy, make sure you are taking care of yourself, make sure you are learning the lessons, because then it really kind of just flows through you. And also, most of these action plans are going to require buy-in from ownership, if you are not ownership, to have true success, because some of these things require funding, some of them require, staff meetings, some of them require, just the consistency of how they communicate, the boundaries they've set. So prepare to have uncomfortable conversations with your ownership or other leaders, because sometimes these issues come from those inconsistencies. So you need to know that that's going to have to happen, because when your action plans require foundational change, the foundation is not you. If you are a salaried manager, you are not like the end all be all, unless your owners are completely out of touch and they don't care what you do, which is a very rare situation, and don't take that for granted. But you often need that buy-in to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So the cause and effect here is better communication. You have clearer expectations of the trajectory. There's a two-way street of being a leader that can receive feedback as well as they give it. And if you aren't good at giving feedback, that's also something you need to work on. That is my 2 cents about being a leader. A more unified team, you're leading by example. You are figuring out ways to invest in the success of your team. You're figuring out ways to better support your team. And by leading by example, the team sees that and they will do that for each other. Systems in place for new employees. So you've created this system, you've gone through this great action plan, you now have this education plan that all of your team is able to go through. Imagine being a new employee, like 2 weeks after that has been fully implemented, and you go into this workplace and they are just like so equipped and ready to just invest in your professional goals. Like, that feeling alone makes me just like so happy to know that like somebody could come in and feel that level of support and feel that level of care from day one on a job. And the bottom line is that the why, in addition to the how, are clearly defined. Your values and your priorities, they are seen through what you do.
Great.
Do you have thoughts?
No, I think yes. There is a lot of following up. I think is very important. Sometimes we have a plan, we have an idea, and we kind of putting priorities of other things. The staff should be priority. The staff is definitely one of the main things. You can go to the best place, but no, you can have the best cocktail, you can have the best cuisine. If the service is horrible, nothing's going to taste as good. We all agree on that. So the staff require some to spend a lot of time because it's a key success factor of your business. I really like the fact also you mentioned also that it's a realistic plan. Sometimes you have a plan, but if you don't have the right ownership, if you don't have all the support you need also from above, it's hard also to produce the result that you want to produce. So it's important again to have communication. So definitely a very good point, Chelsea.
Yeah, it's important to get your ducks in a row, and by laying the action plan out like that, you can see just how many ducks are in a row and how many ducks are like out here running around in a field, and you need to like pull them in, little ducklings, follow me, and get the ducks literally in a row. So it's a silly metaphor, but we've all experienced that, where you're like, why isn't this plan working? And you've got a rogue duck just like running out in the middle of the street. So
get your ducks together.
Get your ducks in a row, everyone. Well, I think the next slide is questions, if I'm not mistaken. So do we have any questions that have come in?
So far, no. We have a very well explained class and very detailed, so it's very enjoyable.
Awesome. Well, let me jump to the last slide, and then I can say kind of how people can follow up with me, because a lot of the questions may not be coming in because this is very introspective. And by kind of asking the questions on Facebook, you can't ask questions anonymously. So it may be like very personal, and I totally understand that. It may be something on your journey as a manager that you're working on. So like, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. They say, anonymous and, in the closest confidence. But if you need a sounding board as you're working through this stuff, so you can follow me on Instagram. That's for sure. My Instagram handle is Gregoire Drinks. My business, Drinkable Genius, is on Facebook. Feel free to follow, or send a message through there. My website, drinkablegenius.com, it has a contact page, so feel free to get in touch there. Or a thing that I've launched since I last came on the Portland Cocktail Week platform is a Patreon. So I've built a lot of spreadsheets and systems and templates and things for instituting kind of some more organizational stuff. If it saves you a half hour in what is a very weird, busy time for a lot of people, there's different tiers that you can subscribe, but for the cost of a cocktail each month, I'm releasing kind of spreadsheets and systems and education monthly to anybody who needs some help or needs some fresh spreadsheets. Any way that I can help you all out and get a little bit back just for my time. But also, if you have friends that enjoy cocktails and you would just like to support, those efforts, there's also subscription levels where, you can just get a cocktail recipe each month and get some invites to some fun gatherings via the Zoom, hopefully someday in person again. But so check us out on Patreon. I'd love to have some people stay in touch that way. But yeah, I feel like I've just been kind of talking and sharing, but this is really hard stuff, to face your own leadership skills or lack thereof in some areas, and to be honest with yourself about where you're at. So if you are watching and you're freaked out, it's okay. We've all been there. I freak out at least once daily. So here we are.
And I think it's okay because there's always something to learn and to improve. And it's important to keep this spirit, not just for 1 month, not just for one day. It's even in 20 years, we have always something to learn.
Yep.
And it's important to keep this mojo, this spirit. If you want to continue to improve, the day you stop thinking about this, you're not going to improve anything. The career is going to be mostly not moving anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No more challenge, nothing exciting. There's always a question to ask: how can we make ourselves better at any level? But Chelsea, thank you very much for doing this amazing class. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Once again, it was Chelsea Gregoire and myself, Xavier Herit. This class was sponsored by the Campari Academy. Grand Marnier also was definitely part of this sponsor. So I hope everyone enjoyed. And here we have a bottle right here. And maybe we'll have a shot together after that. Maybe a sipping one. Yes. Thank you very much again. Chelsea, any last word, anything you'd like to add?
Everybody make sure you vote on November 3rd. Make your plan now. That should be your first action plan if you haven't already written it. And then remember that the work does not stop on November 4th. You know, we're all like waiting with bated breath to see what results come out of this election. But at the end of the day, just like the down ballot is super, super important and your local officials affect your day-to-day life, these things with your employees affect their day-to-day life, affects your ability to lead and to manage. And so start making your action plans now. Don't be afraid. Money's tight, energy's tight, but we do have some time. So let's set some stuff in motion and let's make our industry better on the other side of this thing. And that's what I have.
Thank you so much. And vote. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good day. All right, bye.